So what's your thought on how AI is currently going? Do you think it will? Because so many people are scared. You have people from being scared and not using it at all, from people to being extremely hyped by it. Where is the balance?
Balance is realizing its limitations.
Meet Brian Inkster, founder and CEO of Inksters, Scotland's plug-and-play law firm and winner of the FSB UK Award 22. Described as a one-man Scottish legal institution and a maverick, Brian is redefining how law firms operate through innovation, independence, and bold thinking.
And what it can actually do for you. You know, in law, there's a lot of people thinking it can do legal research and using it for that purposes, and there's been lots of problems because people have been asking, just ChatGPT about legal cases, and because it hallucinates, it comes up with a lot of nonsense. And for solicitors not to realise the dangers of that and even learn from that first time it happened, the fact that it's happened at least 121 times since. One of my probably frustrations when I was employed in a law firm was that I felt more constrained and confined then, because you were effectively controlled by the people who owned the firm, and if you wanted to grow within their firm, you were being potentially held back from that if they weren't supporting your wish to grow. And that's really probably why I set up my own law firm. Also, often in traditional law firms, and especially smaller ones, you've got a partnership of say 6 partners, and each of those partners is given a business task to run. They're given different tasks to do. They're having to do that as well as being a lawyer. It doesn't follow that the task they've done is something that they're inherently good at or interested in or anything. You're better looking to people who are not solicitors, who have those abilities.
So today we are going to be talking to Brian Inkster. He's a one-man firm, a lawyer here.
Solicitors. Solicitors.
Sorry,
you can say lawyers, but solicitors is better.
Lawyer.
Solicitors is better.
Sorry. All right. I want us to take a look at your background, what prepared you for what you are currently doing now. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
So, if we go right back, my background is I come from Shetland, which is the furthest north group of islands in Scotland. So I come from there. I went to Edinburgh University in 1985 to study law. And then once I finished my law degree and my diploma in legal practice, I had to do a 2-year traineeship in a law firm to become a qualified solicitor. And I decided to come to Glasgow for a change of scenery in the early 90s, because I'd been in Edinburgh for a number of years, and I just thought it would be a nice change to come to Glasgow. But at that stage, I only had to come for 2 years to do the traineeship. But I came to Glasgow, did my traineeship with a law firm, got kept on as an assistant solicitor, and then became an associate solicitor in that firm, and was there for about 8 years. So that was me kind of established in Glasgow. And then I made a decision to set up my own firm in 1999.
Wow. Yeah, so you've been running your law firm since 1999 till date. For most people, when they work with an established place for a very, very long time, it becomes very comfortable for them. That is their comfort zone. There are bills to pay, which is reasonable. There are bills to pay. Some people mortgages, and because of that, they sort of trapped in that kind of confined environment. How were you able to transit?
So I don't see it as a confined environment at all. It's always an ever-changing and moving and expanding thing. One of my probably frustrations when I was employed in a law firm was that I felt more constrained and confined then, because you were effectively controlled by the people who owned the firm, and if you wanted to grow within their firm, you were being potentially held back from that if they weren't supporting your wish to grow. And that's really probably why I set up my own law firm, because I was at a stage where I'd grown my own client base, mostly at that time from Shetland, because I came from there, and although I was in Glasgow, I was getting work coming from the islands. And I was working every hour that was sent to me, but I was doing it all myself with the support of a secretary. but I felt there was a need to have more solicitors to assist what I was doing and to grow on that basis. And my options were to stay where I was at, and probably just the same thing would perpetuate, or to go to another firm, but would it be any different? But if I set up my own firm, I knew I could, control my own destiny and grow the firm the way I wanted to grow it.
Awesome. So now talking about growing the firm, growing within the firm and growing outside of the firm, what lessons have you learned about growing your business?
Okay, so most law firms operate on a traditional partnership basis where there's several partners in the firm, or you might have sole practitioners who just run the firm themselves. I'd seen the problems, I think, of partnerships where often growth doesn't happen as quickly as it might because it's constrained by partnership meetings where everybody has to agree, and often they don't all agree, and there's a lot of bureaucracy. It takes a lot of time for things to happen because they'll have a monthly partners meeting, they'll discuss something, they'll probably be discussing the same thing 6 meetings later without actually
taking any action.
Yeah, getting on and doing it. If you are controlling your own firm, you've got much more ability to make decisions and actually make things happen quickly, subject to perhaps financial constraints or whatever. But if there's something you want to do that you can do easily, you can just get on and do it. So I think that's an advantage. But in the early days of running my law firm, I was looking at bringing on extra people to help so I could grow in that way. And because I wasn't a partnership, but I was a sole practitioner, I was able to make those decisions and take people on. But at times you felt like you were taking 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back, because you would take on a young solicitor, a trainee maybe, train them up for 2 years, keep them on as an assistant. They would be very good because you kept them on because they were good, but then they would up and go somewhere else, not because they didn't like working with me, but because they wanted to see what else was out there in the world. And that's fairly natural. I think historically, many years ago, people going into a law firm and doing a traineeship, they would almost see it as a firm for life. It was they would have a progression from being a trainee to being an assistant to being an associate to being eventually a partner in that firm. And often people did just stay in the same firm all their time. But I think things have changed and people move around much more, want to see what else is out there. And indeed, in some cases, people actually change careers. So although they've trained in law, they take a decision that they are going off to do something completely different.
Wow.
And I've seen that happening in our firm. So at times, growth was difficult because you had the people, but then the people went elsewhere and you had to bring in new people and kind of start
all over
again. And it was really about 14 years ago that I saw that in England and Wales, there were different models of law firm emerging. And that was really out of the Legal Services Act in England, which allowed ownership of law firms by non-lawyers. So up to that point, you had to be a lawyer to own a law firm in England and Wales. And that's still the case in Scotland. You have to be a solicitor to own a law firm. But, and I'll come on and discuss that later if you want me to, but I saw that in arising from what they call in England alternative business structures, which is firms that can be non-lawyer owned, different models were being experimented with. So historically, lawyers had just always done the same thing. They'd never thought about operating in different ways. And what was developing in England and Wales was, it comes under different names, but a fee-sharing consultancy model where solicitors are all self-employed, running their own businesses, but the firm is an overall arching umbrella over that. So they can, rather than having to set up their own firm and have all the problems of
the admin, marketing, all of those.
All of those things, IT, insurance, lots of things. A firm will be formed that does all that for them, so it's really doing all the administration and everything else for them. the IT, the cash room, the regulatory stuff, and they can just go into that firm and work as a self-employed person with their own clients, do business development in order to bring those clients to them, and just concentrate on actually doing the law and not be distracted by all the
other parts
of running a business. And we take care of that. So I saw this happening in England, Wales, and thought, why is this not happening in Scotland? You don't need to be an ABS to do this. It's just a different model. It's a different way of doing things. So I thought, we will try doing this. But we'll do it at the same time as running, we're not going to just overnight say, we're just doing this. We would still have our employed lawyers, which we had, and we would bring in self-employed consultant lawyers who would operate on the self-employed basis. So we started doing that 13 years ago and did it fairly slowly to begin with because we wanted to make sure that it all worked and that the infrastructure was right and so on. Around that time there were things happening that made it easier, especially to have solicitors operating outside Glasgow, because we weren't just looking at it that these solicitors would just be in Glasgow. And it was at a time when cloud computing was starting to be spoken about, but only very early days of that. So we moved everything into the cloud in 2011. Which
wow, that was pretty early for a law firm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, lots of law firms didn't get around to doing that until the pandemic, when they realised that
there's no way to move forward.
And also around the same time, or maybe even before that, we installed a VoIP phone system. So we, at a very early stage, had an internet-based phone system. Now, everybody's going to have to move to that, I think, next year, because they're switching off the analog system, and you're going to have internet phones. But we were doing that, in 2011 or before. And that enabled us to bring in consultant solicitors anywhere in the country where they could be operating from home or from a small office somewhere, but they were connected. We didn't need to think about, infrastructure in their offices, but the connection was one where they were connected to our Glasgow office. So whilst we might have a local telephone number, say in our Wick office up in Caithness, that phone rings through to a receptionist in Glasgow who, through the internet, can see whether the solicitor in Wick is on the phone or not, because it's all connected like an internal switchboard, and can transfer the call through to them or can take a message and send an email. So we have a central hub in Glasgow with the administrative staff who can help and assist all the solicitors, but using technology when it was available to use it in that way at a very early stage gave us an advantage and an ability to operate a firm like this in a way that probably no one had really ever done before in Scotland. It was happening in England, but we were looking at it. And again, coming from Shetland and doing work for people in Shetland, I already knew how you could operate at a distance by being in Glasgow, but you could serve people who were not in your immediate geographical area. So I'd always had an interest in how you could use technology in a way that could assist the process of helping people in rural parts of Scotland. And I suppose that's what we were doing by moving into the cloud and by getting a VoIP phone system.
Wow. From what you are saying now, I can see that you sort of quickly, you notice patterns very quickly, and you are able to spot patterns, and you are able to make changes very quickly. Is there a way you think, how do you do that? How should I think? How should I look at my environment for opportunities like this?
Well, it's not looking at your environment, it's looking at the wider environment. So if you concentrate too much on your own environment, you're not going to see anything. You have to look outside and see what's happening in other places. And effectively, that's what I was doing. I was seeing, that cloud computing was there and it was available. And I was thinking, well, it only makes sense to be using that. I remember in the early days of going to legal tech conferences, people were putting up all the obstacles and the reasons for why you couldn't use cloud computing. I remember somebody saying that they couldn't possibly have their information on the cloud because there wasn't a good enough signal, Wi-Fi or phone signal to use 3G at that time, probably before 4G, whilst travelling between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And so they wouldn't be able to operate on the train, but if they'd had everything downloaded onto their laptop, they would. But that was their excuse for not going into the cloud, a nonsense, because you could still be in the cloud and you could still download stuff onto your computer if you didn't think you were going to be getting a signal. Yep. But it was those sorts of, nonsensical excuses being put up for not going into the cloud. And security was a big one. People would say, it's not secure to have your information in the cloud. Well, it's far more secure to have it in a secure data center than to have it in your own office where somebody could break in and pick up a server and walk out with it. But there were always answers to that. But I think a lot of people put up resistance and they look for excuses and reasons for why they shouldn't be doing something. You need to look at the positives and the reasons why you should be doing it. To get back to what I was saying earlier, you need to look outside your own environment and see what other people are doing. Because often, Scotland can be quite a small place, well, compared with other areas and jurisdictions. And when it comes to law, because the law is different in Scotland from England and Wales and from Northern Ireland, we've got in the UK effectively 3 separate legal systems. And what's happening in Scotland might be quite behind what's happening in England and Wales. So looking at other jurisdictions and seeing what they're doing and thinking, can I borrow from that? If somebody's doing something that seems quite a good idea in England and Wales, why not look at doing it here? So I think you need to look outside and have an open mind. You need to read, you need to listen to podcasts, you need to look at what's going on in general in other places. And that's not just England and Wales, because you can borrow from other countries from how people are doing things, and that would be true of any industry or business. Somebody might be doing something somewhere else in the world that would benefit you if you got to hear about it and know about it.
Wow, that was really nice. Thank you so much. That was nice. So the next thing I want to ask you is, most business owners do not use personal branding, do not use the LinkedIn, do not use social media. And again, for your own kind of profession, I can understand, but you seem to be using all of this technology very well. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for people who are running business and are far behind, not only in technology? You've talked about how to adopt technology, personal branding on social media in 2025.
Okay, 2025 is a bit different from what it was previously, because we were the first law firm in Scotland on Twitter. So we were on Twitter before any other lawyer had thought about it. And I set up, at the time when I went on Twitter, I don't know how many years ago that is, but it's a good while ago. I thought I was going to do this for business purposes. So I thought, I'm going to use Twitter, see it was very early days, but we'll see how it works for marketing and things. So the first thing I did was set up a Inksters Twitter account under the name Inksters, not under the name Brian Inkster, but under the law firm name, because I was thinking I'm going to do this for business. But I soon realized that wasn't how Twitter worked, that people were dealing with people, not firms. Right. So I set up a Brian Inkster account and concentrated on using that rather as the Inksters account. But I also started setting up other accounts. Like I specialize in crofting law, so I set up a crofting law account. I set up some property accounts and other things that were specific to areas of law we did, on the basis that you might find people who were interested in just following information about a specific area of law rather as things in general. So I ended up with several Twitter accounts, but concentrating mostly on the Brian Inkster account, because then you were interacting with other people. and you were more having a discussion like me and you are having, where you're actually chatting to somebody, whereas it's very difficult to do that from a firm's perspective.
Yeah.
But the firm can still broadcast things, it can still say what's happening, and then the solicitors within the firm who have Twitter accounts can retweet that, and so on. And no one was really doing that when I was doing it, this sort of series of accounts, and people started noticing it, and somebody wrote an article about it and called it tweeting in convoy. That what you were doing, it was like a navy where you've got a destroyer, which is the main, or a battleship, which is the main. The battleship's the main sort of entity. So that's like the firm account. So that's like the Inksters account, and then you've got the sort of other frigates or whatever who are the niche accounts for the areas, and then you've got the individual solicitors who are the niftier boats that can move around a lot quicker. But when you get them all operating together, then you're tweeting in convoy.
Impressive.
And so we did that for many years, and we, through Twitter, I made lots of contacts, lots of things happened through social media that would never happen before. Opportunities arose to maybe appear on things like podcasts, to write articles for people, to get referrals because you were, becoming, people were aware of you on an international stage. You would get maybe referrals from other solicitors in England who were referring work to Scotland. That's and even out with England and Wales, and it just gives you a presence that you would not have otherwise. And you have to put a bit of effort into that, but you can't let it dominate your life. You just need to do that as an aside of an evening, or when you're on a train or whatever, and not eat into your general business day. But I saw using social media in that way having great benefits. I was at an event last night in Edinburgh and spoke to two people that I'd never seen before, and I knew them, but we'd never met in person, but our connection was through Twitter.
Wow.
And we knew one another to see through Twitter.
Impressive.
And that makes connections at events, at networking events, far more easier, because if you've already connected through social media, it's as though you feel that you know the person. And so it's not like just going up and chatting to somebody cold. You can go up and they know who you are because they know your face and they recognize you from social media, and you can start chatting to them in a far more easier way.
Warmer way.
Yeah. But I think things have changed. You said about social media in 2025. I mean, Twitter is not what it was, obviously. It's now called X. Solicitors have left it in droves. I don't use it anymore because it's not the place it once was at all. An alternative to Twitter is possibly Blue Sky, but it's not had the same traction. It's very like what Twitter used to be originally, and although there's people on there, it doesn't seem to have the same.
People in this age will call it vibe.
Yeah, vibe. That's a good one. So, not the same vibe. And really, I probably find myself using LinkedIn more as anything else at the moment, but it's very different from what Twitter was. Twitter had its own kind of uniqueness, and ability to do things quickly and just have quick, short chats, and was probably a more amusing place at times to be. But for business purposes, LinkedIn is a good place, obviously, to be and to still be connecting with people and sharing information, as I'm sure you'll be doing with this podcast. But it is different, I think. But I think at the moment, that's really the only social media platform. And I feel that sometimes people try too hard on it and are spending too much time feeling that they have to be posting on it all the time. the way I use it is if I've got something I need to say or feel I need to say on LinkedIn, I'll say it. But I don't have this, I must post every day, or I must have a schedule of posts or anything like that. And I post when I want to, I look at it when I want to, and if I see something I want to comment on, I do, but I don't feel any compulsion.
That's very important. That's a very thin line that many people are right now, where they've turned, that's, unless you are a content creator, where that has become the main job.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want you to advise, to ask you is, let's talk about what has been the best year of your business and what made it your best year?
The best year? Every year's the best year. On an incremental basis.
So that means this year must have been the best year so far.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult question to answer, but you could say your best year was the year you opened up in business, because if you hadn't started in business that year, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, you could say that. You might say the best year was the year I decided to pivot to the fee-sharing model and bring in consultant solicitors. Because if I hadn't decided to do that, the business wouldn't have developed in the way it has over the past 13 years. You might say that the best year was the year I decided to just concentrate purely on that model and not have employed solicitors, but just have purely consultants, because then I was making that the model that we were going to go forward with. We might say the best year was this year, because in the past 4 or 5 weeks, we've signed up 5 new consultants to join the firm. And that's, in a short period of time, that's the most new people we've had joining us.
Wow.
But, I see it as a constant evolution and something that is constantly growing and changing. And, you said about people not liking change. I do, and I see a need for that. And, I'm growing this model and I'm enjoying doing that. And so every year is an enhancement of some sort on the previous year.
That's pretty succinct. That's really nice. I still want to get back to how you get that kind of mindset, because I see you as, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I want to understand your mindset as to how you are able to experiment. So it was Jeff Bezos that was talking about how the best businesses that will succeed are the ones that experiment the most, who are not afraid of failing, who are not afraid of trying out new things. Historically, the profession you are in is a very, very traditional one where, I'm still using the word again, people do the same things the same way for a very long period of time, when there is no need, they think there is no need for change. And you have, how do you develop this kind of mindset that is always, looking out for opportunities around, trying to see what's the next best thing? And again, because obviously it is working for your firm, you've gotten five consultants in a very, very short period of time. And how can a business owner watching this develop that kind of mindset?
Is it something you develop, or is it something you just have naturally? I don't know. Maybe it's just something that's in me, has been in me, I don't know. But I'm sure you can develop that. I think it's, you say, we've used words like resistant to change and so on. You have to sort of get your mindset in such a way that you're thinking, can we do things differently? And what can we do that's different, that's going to make a difference? When I set up Inksters in 1999, we had a kind of tagline, which was just that little bit different. So even when I set up the firm, I was wanting to be a little bit different from other law firms. even though it was just that little bit different. I wasn't saying it's going to be hugely different. But I was always looking at how we could do things to improve and do things better and be maybe more efficient in how we worked. That efficiency might come back to when I was young and I worked in a bakery in the village of Scalloway, where I come from in Shetland. That's just a small village of 1,000 people. But I worked for this baker who was always looking at ways to make the bakery more efficient and to do things in a more modern or future way. Things like he designed and set up his own system whereby things started happening in the bakery automatically before he had to come in the morning.
Wow.
So like the flour would be in the mixing bowl, but you would have the water would be added automatically through a timer that would come on, empty the water into the flour, and it would start mixing before he even turned up in the morning.
Wow.
And you couldn't buy that as a baker. You know, you couldn't go to a supplier who would supply you with equipment like that. But he was making something to make his job work more efficiently.
Saving more time.
And so maybe I took things from that. I was seeing that at an early time, how a business was looking at, thinking out of the box and thinking about how they could make their business work more effectively and efficiently. And so maybe that rubbed off a bit because I had that early experience of seeing a business owner, thinking up ideas and coming up. And that was just one example. There were many others I could tell you about in that bakery. So I saw various things that were being done that weren't happening in any other bakery in the country, but they were happening in this little bakery in a small village in Shetland.
Wow. Tell me more, please. Because, so again, that was why I asked you the question a little bit about your background. How old were you when you were working at this bakery?
So I'd just been in early secondary school, so maybe 12, 13.
Was that the first time you made money?
No, I was a paper boy before that. I was a milk boy before that.
Impressive. Impressive.
I was probably, making money from a very early age.
I have found through this podcast, through this discussion, that paper boys, most of them tend to own businesses later on in life. So,
and I had this is an aside, but just a little interesting aside. I had the latest paper delivery in the UK because we were in Shetland. Most paper boys deliver the papers first thing in the morning before they go to school. But because the papers had to get from the mainland, Scotland, to Shetland, they got flown in and they only arrived in the middle of the day. So you could only deliver the papers after school, not before school. So I would have had the latest paper delivery in the country. And people were just getting their papers at the end of the day, not the beginning of the day.
Really? How were you able to do that at that?
I did it after school.
Oh, okay.
So it was finished school and then did the paper delivery.
That's nice. Let's now move to the milk delivery. How did you do that?
Well, again, that was just in the village. It was the local milkman who drove around in his van delivering milk to people, and I went with him and just went and set the milk on the doorsteps.
Impressive. And you get paid for that? Impressive, impressive. Then you now moved to the bakery, about 12 years old, and you saw a lot of innovation coming up in the bakery.
Sorry, say again?
I said you were working in the bakery around 12 and you saw a lot of innovation coming around, happening there.
Yeah.
And there is no way that would not have rubbed off on you.
No. And I think it has. And I think, you see that. You see how someone is looking at innovations within their business. And, that was often technological innovations. And you look at how you can do that in practice yourself later on in life. And I also took an early interest in technology because I had a BBC Micro computer. Well, I had a Dragon computer before that, and then I had a BBC Micro, and those were early computers. And so I was actively using computers. I was doing a little bit of coding and working out how to do things on them and stuff, at a time when nobody else in my village was really doing that, and so I'd always had that interest in technology from an early stage. And later on in my law firm, one of the first things, when I set up my law firm, one of the first things I did was implement a practice management system, and I got a fairly advanced one at the time. Cost a fair bit of money when you just set up in business, but I saw that as an important foundation for building a law firm, because you were installing something that would give you benefits over the years, And also on that technological front, I was always looking at how we could make processes in the law firm more efficient for the solicitors. So how technology could be used in a way that was more efficient. And we have a system, a document automation system, where lots of documents that you use that are the same, but they have variables in them, that change from transaction to transaction, that you can call up those templates and they'll just pre-populate with the variables each time, which saves a lot of time on typing and copying and pasting and things.
You already do that. When did you start using this kind of technology?
Well, more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
Probably 15 years ago or something. And maybe even earlier. But we've been using that technology for a long time. And at one point I saw a need to, because there's only so much you can do yourself on this. You buy a technology, but you need to implement it.
Yeah.
And most solicitors are very bad at implementing technology properly. And it's probably not just solicitors, I think businesses in general.
Yeah.
They'll buy a technology, but they'll not necessarily fully implement it. And that takes time and effort. And if you're a busy solicitor dealing with your day-to-day casework, being able to spend time
learning how to use,
and just setting it up. That's the main thing, is setting it up so that it can work properly. So I thought what we needed was somebody who could look at the technology and the processes that the solicitors did and could merge and manage the two and make them all work, which would be a dedicated job in itself, because the solicitors just don't have time to do that.
Through that.
So I thought there was a need for a legal process engineer, and that term had never been used ever before. So my firm, there might have been people working in law firms, especially larger ones, effectively doing that job, but no one had ever coined the phrase legal process engineer. So I did, and I employed the first legal process engineer in the world with that name. Now that's commonplace in large law firms. They have legal process engineers and they call them that.
Impressive. Wow. How did you do that?
How? Well, I just came up with the idea and employed somebody. And as I say, there would have been people doing those types of jobs, especially in larger law firms, but I coined the phrase and made it very specific role, that the role they were going to do was to make our case management system operate at high efficiency by looking at what the solicitors did and working with the solicitors to then work on the technology to make it all fit together and work properly.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. That's incredible.
But
wow.
Is it any different from the automated mixer in the bakery?
The next area I want us to look at is growing a business and adopting technology to optimally grow a business, increase revenue, make processes better. How do you currently do that with your business?
Well, I've explained about the technology, so we try and enhance the technology as much as we can to benefit the solicitors and make things more efficient for them. But it's not just about technology, because you can make things more efficient by having people that work can be delegated to, so that a solicitor's not spending their time doing work that is that they've not been. Their training is to do kind of high-level legal work, so they shouldn't be spending their time doing a lot of administrative work. So again, we provide back-office support where we have legal administrators who can help and assist the solicitors to do work that the technology can't do, but they can still use the technology, because there's lots of things you still need people for. And I'm a bit of an AI skeptic, although I'm interested in technology. There's a lot of hype at the moment about how much AI can do, and I think it's really much more limited as people are making out at the moment. So there's still a need for people. There's a need for technology that actually works and that is efficient. And then, as far as I think your question was really about growth in general, I've grown my firm through this new model by bringing on more senior solicitors who have a client following, who come under our model, and by adding more consultant solicitors to the firm, overall that allows the firm to grow, but in a way that wasn't possible when I first started out, when I was employing people who were younger, who you were having to train, and then who would leave. I'm going to the other end. I'm going to more senior people who can just get on and do the work themselves. They don't need any training, apart from maybe some technology training on our systems. But beyond that, they've got the life experience. They know what they're doing. They've already got business development skills, and they can just concentrate on doing the law. And my firm can grow by adding more of them to the firm.
Wow. You've got the model really nailed, and you run the most technologically advanced law firm in Scotland. What will you say to somebody who is thinking, so what's your thought on how AI is currently going? Do you think it will, because so many people are scared, you have people from being scared and not using it at all, from people to being extremely hyped by it. Where is the balance?
The balance is realizing its limitations and what it can actually do for you. In law, there's a lot of people thinking it can do legal research and been using it for that purposes, and there's been lots of problems because people have been asking, just ChatGPT about legal cases, and because it hallucinates, it comes up with a lot of nonsense, and it cites fake cases. It makes them up, ones that don't exist.
I'm sorry to cut you. There is a particular one in the US where a lawyer, presented a case, so made so many citations,
and they were all wrong.
And I was ashamed for him.
And that's not particular to one case. I read the other day that there's at least 122 times that this has happened in different parts of the world.
Wow.
In courts.
Wow.
Which have been, reported and identified and kept a note of. And for solicitors not to realise the dangers of that and even learn from that first time it happened, the fact that it's happened at least 121 times since is incredible. I can't understand that at all. And I can't understand how any lawyer who has had proper training would just accept a computer telling you that these were cases that existed without actually then going and looking up those cases and getting the principal document and reading it. That's not how you do law. I've been trained to do law where you look up the actual original sources. You read those original sources from start to finish. You don't summarize it through ChatGPT, and you go into court fully prepared. So it's beyond me how that's happening, but the worry is that younger solicitors will lose something in their training because they'll think that they can just use AI to do everything when they can't, and that's a danger. AI does have some uses, but I think people need to be very careful about generative AI, because generative AI is really just stringing words together and finding things it doesn't understand. It doesn't, if you ask it a question, it just goes out there and from the information that it's been trained on, it just strings together lots of words that make sense, or maybe don't make sense. Usually they look plausible, so when you read it, it's a plausible answer, but there could be hallucinations and mistakes in there. And unless you know that, the mistakes, and you know to go and check them, if you rely on it, you will have a problem. There was a report the other day in Australia where Deloitte had produced a report for the Australian government, which the Australian government had paid them 400,000 Australian dollars for, and it was riddled with hallucinations and mistakes because they'd used AI to write chunks of this report. Wow. and charged the government 400,000 Australian dollars for it. They were now agreeing to give them a refund. I don't know how much, but they should have been giving them all their money back, I think.
And some apology.
Yeah.
So one of the things that many people, many business owners find out later on when they start their businesses, being a technical person, being a good lawyer doesn't translate to being a good business person.
No.
For you, was there a time you realized that, or was it something you've always realized?
I think I probably realized that from working in a firm where I saw that there could be improvements on the business side and the decision-making process. And I think when I set up my own firm, I was very conscious of developing it in a more business-like way, while still importantly doing the law well. The two have to kind of go hand in hand. But also, often in traditional law firms, and especially smaller ones, you've got a partnership of, say, 6 partners, and each of those partners is given a business task to run. So there's the managing partner who's supposed to be managing the place, but usually doesn't do that very well. There's somebody's given the task of IT. Doesn't follow that they know anything about IT. Somebody's given human resources. Somebody's given finance. So they're given different tasks to do. They're having to do that as well as being a lawyer. It doesn't follow that the task they've done is something that they're inherently good at or interested in or anything. You're better looking to people who are not solicitors, who have those abilities. When I brought in a legal process engineer, I was looking for somebody who was technologically capable, also maybe interested in the law. It didn't follow that they had to be a lawyer. And you're looking for people who are best skilled to do the job in question. And there's often things that you can actually outsource. You don't need to have, if you're a small firm, you might not need a full-time person doing a particular task, but you'd be better outsourcing it to somebody who was very specialized in that area, even if you're just buying a few hours of their time every month, than, say, getting a solicitor to do it as well as their job. Yep. So, I've never been scared to outsource tasks that I felt were better dealt with by somebody who was not a lawyer, or better dealt with by someone who was not me, because it wasn't my best skill set.
So that's ability to be able to separate the business processes part of the law and the law itself gave you an advantage. Because businesses are built on processes and systems and all of the things that are out of doing the technical thing. So for instance, let's say a baker now. Can I use a baker? Yeah, that you are a good baker doesn't translate that you are going to run a very, very successful bakery business. Being a baker is a subset of running a successful bakery business. How do you have a framework that you can teach us on how to think about doing this as a business? So for somebody who is an accountant, who is working in an accounting firm who wants to strike out, who wants to go out now, and I want them to be able to understand before going out that doing accounting work and running an accounting business are two different things. I want you to give us a framework on how they should approach this.
It is two different things, and you do need to have a mindset for it. So I think, if you've used the example of an accountant. So if you're an accountant working in an accountancy firm and you're thinking of setting up your own accountancy firm, you need to be sure that you can cope with all the elements of running the business and that you're going to be able to do that yourself. Because when you start off, if you're just setting up a business from scratch and it's just you on your own, maybe one employee to begin with, you have to do everything and anything.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to learn very quickly about things that you've not had to do previously. And you need to be certain and sure that you've got the capabilities and abilities to do that, or you have people that you can rely on or outsource to, but that's all going to cost money. I mean, as soon as you start outsourcing things, so from day one, you're not so able to do that. When I first set up on my own, I was having to do anything and everything myself, really. And it's only when you start to get a little bit bigger that you can bring in people to assist you. So, the framework's going to be different for each person, and it's going to be different depending on their own skill sets, their own abilities, what they can do themselves, and how much energy they have, because you need to have a lot of energy. And you need to realize that it's hard work. None of this is easy. You're going to have to work long hours, if you're running your own business. It's not a 9-to-5 job,
It's a 24-hour job.
And so you need to be prepared for all that. But for somebody who doesn't want all those hassles and issues with creating their own practice, that's where we in law, and there might be accountancy equivalents, I have no idea, but where we in law allow somebody who might have wanted to set up their own business but don't want all those hassles, they can still effectively set up their own business because they're practicing as a freelance self-employed person, but they're getting all the benefits that you would get in a larger firm, but without the same office politics or partnership issues or whatever, because they're able to operate on their own basis for whatever hours they want and however flexibly and where they want to work and everything else. But that's not going to suit everybody, because some people will want to create their own firm and their own destiny. And if you want to do that, go out and do it. I went out and did it, but just realize you're going to have to put a lot of effort into it, and it's going to, take time. But I think once you've done that, you will look back and you will
be happy you did. That's pretty neat. Thank you so much. So the next thing I want to ask is, how should a person who is trying to strike out on their own, how should they think about acquiring customer? Because if you set up a business and there is no customer, there is no business. It's as simple as that. If you say, let's say tomorrow morning I open an accountancy firm, I get an office space and I have no customer, there is no business. So how do you approach customer acquisition, client acquisition? How do you approach that?
Okay, so I was, when I set up my business in 1999, I was fortunate that I had already built up over a period of 8 years a client base. So I had those clients. On day one, I wasn't opening up a law firm and saying, where's my first client coming from? I already had the clients and I was able to take them with me. So that was a big advantage. But then that was still down to 8 years of developing those clients.
Those relationships.
So it's, you have to develop those relationships and build them. And I don't think there would be any lawyer who would just be setting up immediately a law firm without having built up some relationships and know that they had some sources of work. And that might often start with just family and friends and people you know. Referrals is a good way because people will refer work to you. So, that's a good way in law to get work, because if you're known for a particular area of law and you've done a good job for people, they will tell their friends and their family, and other people will come. But you need to market as well. You need to do marketing. We've touched on social media for that purposes, but there's other ways of marketing. Websites, of course, important. We had a website in 1999. It was one of the first things I did was set up a website.
Wow. Back in 1999? That must have been... Wow.
The law firm I was in before had been having meetings about a website for years, and they'd never got one created. And it was many years after 1999 before they had their first website. And, it wasn't much effort, even in 1999. It was the early days of the internet, but they were web design companies. You could just go and say, I need a website, and you could get one. And so we had an early website, maybe not the nicest of websites. It had a Flash image. At that point, Flash was all the thing.
Flash was it.
And the logo rotated around. It all looked nice, but it wouldn't be very sensible in this day and age. So yes, and producing a lot of content. The more content you produce about work you're doing, the more likely you're going to get work coming to you. If you specialize in a particular area, you should be writing articles about that area of law. You should be appearing at conferences speaking about it. You should be speaking about it on specific podcasts relating to that topic. Doing YouTube videos, doing whatever, writing a book. One of my specialities is crofting law, which is the agricultural agricultural land in the Highlands and Islands that are crofts. Do you know anything about crofts? No?
I've only read when I was reading about
it. Yeah, so it only applies in the kind of Highlands and Islands of Scotland and stems from the clearances in 1886 and from the first Crofting Act then. And it's a very specialised area of law, but I set up a blog about that and have blogged for years about crofting law. I write articles regularly in other publications about it. I've been on BBC Radio Scotland, on BBC Alba, on Sunday Politics Scotland, speaking about it. So you get, and I've written a book about crofting law. So all of that, doing all of those things sets you out as being an expert in that field. And then people will come to you because you've got all this big source of material about it. And if you're blogging regularly about that topic, there's content on your website about it, people will come to you through those channels because they'll be Googling, looking for something to do with crofting law, and you will
come up. And when you come up, you already trusted. They are pre-sold. They don't need to worry if this person will be able to do this job or not, because they've seen this person written a book, written a blog on BBC, everywhere. Yeah. So how should somebody who wants to strike out now, how would you advise them to go about thought leadership? Because it seems you take technology very serious, adopting technology very serious. From our conversation and from my research of you take experimentation you experiment, you see things that are working, you bring it in from other parts of the United Kingdom. How should somebody who wants to start out today How should they start thinking of building their sort of a moat, sort of thought leadership? How should they go about it?
You just need to start, and you start, and it's all incremental. You build upon it. So, you know, if there's some particular, whatever business it is, there'll be something particular that you're doing, and how do you let people find out about that? You write about it. If there's topical things happening, you can, even if it's just LinkedIn posts, you know, you don't need to necessarily set up a blog, but you can be constantly speaking about it, so people are seeing that you know about it. And if you are constantly doing that on social media, but preferably you want to do it over different areas,
Channels.
And you find places to do that, then, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a gradual process, but you need to just stick at it. And the more content you are producing, the more stuff about that topic, whatever it is that you specialize in, will be out there, and the more likely people will find you and come to you. You know, it's not a case of you having to go to them by spending your day sending out emails or cold calling people or whatever. You build the content so people come to you. It's inbound marketing.
Yeah.
It's bring the work to you, but you need to build that.
Moat. Yeah. That's pretty neat.
I mean, every day I get spam emails from people, from companies looking for work. You know, most of them go into the junk folder, and then most of them get deleted. But those businesses that are spending all that time, maybe they get some work out of it because they're sending so many emails and so many, you know, that they'll get a very small percentage. But the amount of time they must be spending doing that is huge for things just to be going into junk folders. But if they were spending that time building up a body of work that could be found on the internet, that would bring people to you, that would be time much better spent.
So it is better to build a brand around whatever it is you are doing, because it brings in, you know, warm leads, sometimes very hot lead. I was talking to a particular business owner on this podcast. We are going to have the person to later on. So he said one of the game changers, this was a discussion we had yesterday, he said one of the game changer for him was when he decided to go all in on LinkedIn to talk about what they are doing. So the business, they started about four years ago, around 4 years ago. They raised a lot of money, but when, you know, the runway, you know, they finished spending the money, they need to go back to raise more money. But things changed. He said he now started thinking, why not raise money from the customers? Why not sell to the customer? Why not build a brand? He said some days he'll get 4 inquiries of people who want to work with him. Now they don't need to do cold call. He said now when their salespeople probably do introductions, get to a company they say, we already know you, we already know you, we already know about you, just tell us more about this. Yeah. So which still comes back to what we are talking about in the importance of building a brand, you know, creating content like you have mentioned, you know, doing blogs, doing podcasts, you know, writing articles, wherever it is that you need to do it, because in this age and time, the way businesses are done is changing. Is it okay to talk about money?
Can't speak about that. Depends what you're going to ask.
Well, like, what will you say is the most lucrative part of law?
I don't think that it's a question of what's the most lucrative part of law, because, you know, in a legal firm, there will be areas of law that are more lucrative than others. But I don't think that's how you should look at it. You know, you'll have solicitors who do legal aid work who aren't getting paid very much for it. You know, completely undervalued and underpaid for what they actually do, because the government's not providing the correct levels of funding for that. But they choose to do that because, and they're providing something to society that wouldn't be there otherwise. The solicitors who work in law centres, providing advice to people who can't afford pay for legal advice. There's large law firms that are in big shiny offices that they need to pay for, and they're charging a lot more than smaller firms like my own for probably similar services, and there'll be people that are doing corporate work for big companies,
M&A deals,
multi-million pound deals that have teams of lawyers on them, and the fees will be large as a result of that. So there's a big range in any law firm and separate law firms on what type of work they're doing and how much they're able to charge as a result of that. And that's just the way it is. And within any law firm, there'll be areas of work that they are doing that's more lucrative than other areas, but that's just the way it is. It's just so I don't think you can sort of sit and say, what's the most lucrative and what should you be doing. Most lawyers tend to not, to work over a range of different legal services, and some will probably pay more as others. Some might subsidise the others,
Well, thank you so much for that. Okay, which will bring us back to, this podcast is for business owners, and one of the questions that comes most of the time when it comes to protecting yourself in doing business, what advice do you have for business owners? Because many people treat the legal part of doing business as an afterthought. Should it be part of what you start thinking of from day one? Or, how should you approach this?
Well, if you're a new business, you have to look at the fact that you're complying legally with all the things you need to comply with. That may be simple things like, if you're setting up a website, you need to make sure all the terms and conditions are correct on it, and that you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing on a legal basis. It may be, if you are having contracts with customers, you need to make sure that the contract is going to be good for you as the business owner. Have you had a lawyer actually look at that contract? Have you just taken it off ChatGPT? We spoke about the dangers of that earlier. So there'll be lots of things that anybody running a business might need a lawyer to assist them with, and there's a whole range of things. And sometimes it's better to be prepared than to
be reactive.
Yeah. So, getting your terms and conditions sorted, knowing where you stand with all of those things, although it's going to cost you money and you're going to need a lawyer to look at it, it could stand you in better stead, because if you've just got some sort of template contract off the internet that you think you can utilize in your business, but you've not thought of what that really means, or actually you've downloaded something that's relevant to English law and not Scottish law, and you're using it on a day-to-day basis, and then you end up in court and your lawyer's then telling you, why on earth did you use this contract? It would be much better to use a contract that would be a good contract when you come to court, rather as one that's going to be a bad contract. So the Law Society of Scotland used to, many years ago, this is going back some time, have a kind of catchphrase that they used in their advertising, which is, it's never too early to call your solicitor. And I don't know, that seemed to go away at some point. It's not been used for years, but it's still, I think it's a good catchphrase, because it really never is too early to call your solicitor, because often you can get advice before there's a problem, rather as when there is a problem.
There is a problem. Because when the problem arises, it will be it's maybe come way too expensive then than taking care of things from the get-go. So you've been running business since 1999 till now. Is there this is one of the questions that I ask at the end of the podcast, which is that, was there anything you think and has been proven wrong before you started the business. So, for instance, I'm sure you must have seen people draw up a business plan. You say, months 0 to 6, we don't make any money. Month 8, we don't make any money. From month 9, we break even. Then we start making money, like a golf stick. Was there anything like that for you before? Is there anything you've learned before starting a business that has changed?
Before starting the business? So you're saying something that I learned before starting the business that changes?
Something you thought of before entering the business that has now changed.
I can't immediately think of anything, but maybe I'm struggling with the question a bit. Lots of things change over time. Regulations change. Things that you need to do change.
I'm talking in terms of the business side of things itself. Let's say, I don't know, maybe the beginning of your business, did you have a business plan that had some certain projections?
Okay. Well,
that you had to change.
Yeah.
Tactics?
I never, for example, had a business plan that I was going to, at day one. I never had a business plan that I was going to have the model I now have. So, for the first 13 years, I was operating a firm and growing a firm probably on the basis of my original idea or original business plan. But then I pivoted and did something completely different 13 years later. I made a decision to change the whole model of the law firm. And I never would have thought 26 years ago that would have happened. That's not something I could have foreseen, because it wasn't in my mind, it wasn't in my head. That was something that came along, and as I said earlier, I saw what's happening in England and Wales and thought, let's do this in Scotland. So, there's things that you might think originally how your business is going to develop, but things come along and it changes completely. Yeah. And, whilst I was originally operating a business from Glasgow and I had a lot of clients in Shetland, I still sort of saw the growth of the business even when I pivoted in 13 years ago to being primarily Glasgow because we were still based here. But because I created this model which allowed self-employed solicitors to join us, we started getting people joining us in other rural areas, and maybe my rural background and how I'd been operating in Shetland and Glasgow worked for that. But our first consultant solicitor to join us was in Wick, in Caithness, not in Glasgow. And we now have people in Wick, in Thurso, in the Isle of Skye, really? In Aberdeen, in Forfar, in Dunkeld, in Renfrew, in Linlithgow, in Edinburgh. We're about to have someone start in St Andrews, and we have somebody in London now as well, because we just in June somebody joined us in London. And none of that was in my mind when I set up the business here. When I set up the business in 1999, I knew I had a client base in Shetland, but I was going to be operating primarily from Glasgow. I didn't think today that we would be operating from 14 different bases throughout Scotland and now in London as well. That wasn't in any business plan. That happened. When it started to happen, you allow it to happen, you do things to make it happen, and so on. I've never sitting with a map of the UK, putting in pins saying we have to have an office here. That's just happened organically through people wanting to join Inksters who happen to be in
those places,
in other places, and our model allows that to happen.
Awesome. So you've had to change your business model over the years.
Not had to.
No. We had to. You have. Oh, sorry. Yeah. That's the right word. You have changed the business model over, from the time you started till now, and which has given you a lot of advantage. Pivoting, I want you to talk about what should I look out for before pivoting, because I've seen many business owners get stuck in a business that is not working. Maybe not that the business is not working, but there are things that needs to be changed, but they are not open to changing it. They are open, if they try harder, things are going to change. So one example comes to mind right now. I was talking to somebody who owns a corner shop close to where I used to live, and the person told me himself that he noticed that the people he's serving prefers to have somebody bring things to their house. They don't want to come out. He said most of them are now old, and he doesn't want to do that. So what he is trying to do now is incentivize people to come into the shop. In like 3 months, he already shut down the shop. In 3 months from when we were discussing that, he is had to shut down the shop because the business was not going where it's supposed to go. Because of course, people change, things change, especially after COVID, and he is unable to do that. So I want to ask you, how should a business owner approach pivoting, changing business model?
So if you see a need in your own business to pivot, there has to be a need, because there might be no need to pivot. If your business is operating well and you're happy with it and you're happy with the level it's at, and it's not every business that wants to grow. Some people are happy with a business being at a certain level because it provides them with the income they want and they've got no ambitions beyond that. But if you are feeling that things are changing, so in your example, people are wanting things delivered to them rather as going to the shop, you maybe actually need to think about that and say, well, if that's what the customer wants, I cannot carry on providing the same service I've been doing, because otherwise I'm going to go out of business. So there can be a forced pivot. And if you don't realize that soon enough, you will not have a business. And I suppose, people always cite the, examples of that, like Blockbuster Video, and Netflix and stuff, and Kodak and so on. It's churned out time and time again. And those are really big businesses that should have pivoted, but they didn't appreciate or realize the need. They probably thought they were too big and too established to do so. But history shows that if they had pivoted when they should have, they would probably, become the Netflixes or, but they didn't do that. So I think there's a realizing at a right time that you need to make change and making that change. Not all pivots, my pivot wasn't an essential pivot. I could have just carried on the way I was, but I wouldn't have grown the firm in the way I have. My pivot was something that I saw happening elsewhere and thought, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do this to create a new business model that will change the shape of the business and hopefully give us growth, which it has. So I think I've answered that, but I think it's in summary, there's two aspects. There'll be times when you really have to pivot, and you should be realizing that at an early stage and seeing that your business is not performing as well as it should. And what do you need to do to satisfy your customers? In your example earlier, if that's to do home deliveries, do the home deliveries. Don't expect the customer to come to you if they don't want to. And if it's something that you're seeing happening elsewhere that you think, I could be doing this within my business, just get on and do it, and try. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You can try something else.
That's cool. So the last, I have maybe 2 or 3 questions before we end. So the question for you now is, we are all going to die. So how do you want to be remembered? What do you want to be your legacy?
I suppose there'll maybe be two aspects, because I'm a businessman and I'm a solicitor, and I've got a lot of things I've done in law that have become case law and authorities and so on. So I think people will always look at those, the things I've done in crafting law and the law of servitudes, which have created new law because I've been involved in cases which have set precedents. And so I think for any lawyer, those things remain in the case books as authorities, and people will always hopefully look back at those and see that I played a part in developing the law in those areas. And as a businessman, hopefully there'll be a legacy which will live beyond me, which will be the firm that I've created, that'll hopefully still be there in some shape, form or fashion after I go. And I think in Scottish terms, there'll probably be other businesses that develop similar to the way I've developed my business. They've just been a bit behind in doing so, but they'll see the benefits of the type of business I've created, and I'm sure we will see more of those arising. And there'll be a legacy of that model in Scotland going on in the future, but people will be able to look back and see that I was an early adopter of that, and that a lot of people who have maybe copied or created businesses in a similar way will have looked at what I have done in order to create their businesses. And even things like the way that we've operated with technology and so on, there'll be other firms that will be doing that. Like I gave the example of the legal process engineer. It was within a few months of me creating that term, there was large law firms that were advertising for legal process engineers. So I created a terminology that now sticks and is used throughout the world.
That must be a problem. So the next thing is, what has been the proudest moment for you in your career? Maybe highlight one or two or three.
Well, I suppose setting up the business to begin with. That is just the fact you've done that is a thing. And I think it kind of comes back. I think we discussed this earlier about what was the best year. This is no different, your question, in a way, because the proudest moment is similar to what was your best year. There's many, and I think it's very difficult to highlight one over everything else, because a lot of things that you do that are good moments because you've chosen to do them, whether that was my pivot 13 years ago, whether that was things I've been doing recently through marketing and advertising to bring in more consultants. All of those are kind of important points that have led to a further development in the firm, but it must all go back to the day that you actually established the firm. If you hadn't established the firm in 1999 or whenever, even if I'd done it a few years later, it wouldn't have mattered. Whenever I did it, I was taking that step. So that in itself probably has to be, if you were looking at one thing, the proudest moment, because if you hadn't done that, nothing would have followed.
That makes sense. Did you do you know you will do business? Have you always known that you are going to run your own business?
No.
So it was when you saw the things where you worked that you couldn't effect change that made you decided to.
I mean, it wasn't something that was in my mind when I was a paper boy, a milk boy, a baker, or a lifeguard. We didn't discuss that. That was another job I had.
Really? That's intensive.
I was working in the bakery and doing the lifeguard work at the same time. So I would go to the bakery early in the morning and then finish and then do the lifeguard during the day. But anyway, when I was doing those jobs, I wasn't thinking, although I was probably for a young boy entrepreneurial because I was going out there and getting jobs and doing work and making money. I don't think children don't do that anymore, do they?
I don't think so. No. I don't say
And they're probably not allowed to, but anyway, when I was doing that, I wasn't thinking in my mind, someday I am going to be running my own business. Even at that time, I didn't know I was going to be a lawyer. I only knew I was going to be a lawyer when I applied to do a law, and even when I applied to do a law degree and went to Edinburgh University to study, I was doing a law degree. I wasn't necessarily thinking I'm going to be a solicitor, because you were doing a degree that would enable you to do other things if you wanted to. But then, as I did the law degree, I must have decided that I was quite happy to be a solicitor and to go in and do that. And I've not really regretted that in any shape, form or fashion. But I think, I never had in my mind I am going to be running my own law firm until I really felt I had to.
Until you felt you had to. So let's close on this. Who are you outside of work?
Outside of work? That's a very difficult question, because I don't do much other than work. So, other things outside of work, I like to travel. Me and my wife go to the theatre quite a bit. She's a theatre architect, or that's her history, was designing theatres. And so there's always kind of a connection with theatres and going and seeing them. And I like to go to the cinema. I like travel. So I've done a lot of travelling over the years. I spent a year travelling around the world when I was younger. And I took a gap year between my law degree and the diploma in legal practice, and spent a year travelling around the world on my own. And we do a fair bit of travelling. I'm going to Singapore and Thailand at the end of this month. And but a lot of my time is spent working, because when you're running a business, that's what you do. We have had, I've done, my wife also likes dancing, so we've did salsa dancing for a while, and we did tango dancing. We went on a salsa dancing holiday in Cuba. We went tango dancing in Buenos Aires.
I'm just trying to imagine you dancing tango. That's cool.
But we've not done that for a little while. So we've done bits and pieces like that. When we went to Buenos Aires, we actually went with Habitat for Humanity and spent 2 weeks helping them build houses in a poor part of Buenos Aires. So, there's things like that we do.
Impressive. Wow. That's good. Yeah, so maybe one or two. I keep saying this is my last question, because I enjoy talking to you. I should stop saying this is my last question. I want you to talk to, who are your target audience? I want you to talk to them and tell them why they should come to you.
So my target audience at the moment is principally solicitors who are not necessarily happy where they are. 26 years ago, I wasn't particularly happy where I was at, because I had a law firm. I was working in a law firm, but they weren't interested in me developing a business within their business. I have now created a business which is all about helping solicitors develop a business within my business, and helping them grow and helping them develop and helping them work the way they want to work. So, having developed this model, I'm interested in speaking to any solicitor anywhere in the UK, principally in Scotland, but also potentially out with Scotland, but principally in Scotland, who aren't necessarily happy in the workplace they're at the moment, who might want to do something themselves. Maybe they've thought about setting up their own law firm, but know of all the hassles that go with that. I can take those hassles away from them they can come and work under Inksters umbrella. We can provide all the technology, the back office support that they need to just concentrate on doing the law, and we can help them with business development and marketing, and they can operate in a way where they don't feel constrained by the owners of a law firm they're working in, where they can have a more flexible way of working, where they can work from home, they can work in an office if they want to, they can work hybrid, they can work whatever hours they want, however many days a week they want, and have a maybe better experience as a lawyer working under our umbrella than they are having at the moment. Also, there are some solicitors who are forced to retire at a certain age because the partnership agreement says you get to age 65, sometimes less, and you must retire because we need to bring on younger people into our firm to... That's the way the firm operates. Wow. But a lot of people at that stage might not be necessarily wanting to retire because they still like working. They might
have a lot of experience.
Yeah, and they still have clients and so on, and they want to even just keep their hand in. Our model allows people like that to come and join us because we are able to provide a home for them to still carry on working. Because we are not saying you must work 9 to 5, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, 5 days a week, however long solicitors work. And most solicitors work longer as 9 to 5, they'll be working into the evenings. But there's nobody saying to you, you have to work these many hours, you have to bill this amount of time, you have to bring in this amount of fees. That's up to the individual. And, there's people who maybe want a life beyond working. You asked me what I did when I wasn't working, and I said, I'm working most of the time, but I do maybe occasionally do other things. But there are people who have an active hobby or interest that they want to pursue. We have a consultant solicitor who is a part-time actor and musician, composes his own music, so he wants the ability to do that and do the law. Our model allows that. We had a consultant who looked after soy sheep from the island of St Kilda and wanted time to do that as well as doing the law. Our model allowed her to do that. So, it's not, our model allows a flexibility that people might not have otherwise. For even like a solicitor who might be thinking of retiring in a few years' time, maybe a sole practitioner who's got a practice, but they're looking towards retirement, they could come within our model and we would find a home for their work when they actually do retire, and they would still be remunerated beyond them retiring for the fact that they've brought that work to the firm.
Wow.
So it can appeal to a lot of solicitors, and a lot of solicitors may not have thought about this model being right for them, but unless they have a discussion, they won't know, and I'm happy to have those discussions with anybody who wants to have those discussions with me and to find out if it's a right fit for them or not.
Wow. That's pretty neat. I feel I should be a solicitor and come and work for you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this brings us to the end of this show.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you. I've had a wonderful time. I've learned a lot. And I'm sure everybody here, thank you so much.
Okay.